The sea is still in the hour before dawn. It presses softly against the stones of the Bosphorus like a hand against glass, patient, eternal, unknowable. Above it, the air hangs heavy with salt and mist, veiling the coastline in pale silver. The ships at harbor lie motionless, their sails slack, their hulls creaking faintly in the breathless dark. Seabirds huddle in silence on the rafters of forgotten warehouses, waiting for light, or the illusion of it. And there, above the water, carved into the bones of the earth and crowned with the dreams of emperors, rises Constantinople. Its towers pierce the fading stars like iron needles. Its domes shimmer with trapped starlight. But within, all is hushed, as if the very city is holding its breath, unwilling to greet another day under the weight of memory. Within the Hagia Sophia, where angels once danced upon golden ceilings, only footsteps stir. Echoes of footsteps. A priest, robed in shadow, walks slowly across the cold marble. His sandals whisper against the floor, and in his hand he carries a small candle, its flame flickering in the stillness, bending with each breath of air as though reluctant to remain. The air here is thick with old incense and older grief. The walls, lined with saints, seem to lean inward, as if straining to hear his whispered prayer. In the hour of silence, let us remember. He kneels. The flame wavers. Somewhere above, a pigeon stirs in the high rafters, feathers shifting like parchment. And below, deep beneath the weight of domes and relics, the city stirs. In the outer courtyard, an old woman sweeps rose petals from the flagstones, her broom moving in slow, rhythmic arcs. Her veil is soaked with dew, her back bowed not by age, but by remembrance. She does not hum. She does not speak. Her lips move silently, not in prayer, but in counting. Each petal, a year. Each year, a loss. She remembers the coronation of a boy emperor in this very court. Remembers how he wore the crown too large for his head, how he wept behind the veil as the congregation chanted his name in 1,000 voices. She remembers the gold, the blood, the trembling smile of a mother who had climbed too high. And how, just beneath the incense and the lilies, there was already the scent of ruin. She does not speak of these things. No one does. But the petals fall every year, and she sweeps them just the same. In the distance, the hippodrome lies asleep beneath the weight of its silence. The great spina still stands, though the statues that once adorned it have long since been stripped away, carted to Venice, or shattered by mobs who could no longer feed their children. Only shadows remain, etched in stone and memory. The cries of the crowd, the thunder of chariots, the roar of factions, all gone. Now, only the wind moves here. It whistles through the broken arches. It gathers dust where emperors once paraded in glory. And it carries with it the faint, bitter scent of ash. A boy runs barefoot along the sea wall, his breath steaming in the cold morning air. He carries a small wooden cross, carved roughly from olive wood. The monk who gave it to him was blind, and swore he had seen heaven in a dream, a heaven where the city still stood untouched, her domes intact, her banners unfallen. The boy does not know of wars, or schisms, or crusades that came not from the east, but from those who once called themselves brothers. He does not know the names carved into the foundations of this empire, Constantine, Theodora, Basil, Irene. But he knows the stone beneath his feet, the salt in the wind, the silence of the bells. He stops, suddenly, where the wall overlooks the sea. The sky is bleeding light now, the kind that paints the world not in gold, but in bruises. And there, for just a moment, the domes of the city catch fire. Not real fire. The fire of dawn. It washes over the Hagia Sophia, over the palace roofs, over the worn cobbles where 1,000 boots once marched. It gives color to the peeling frescoes, light to the broken windows, grace to the wounds that history carved into the bones of the capital. And it reveals something else, too. The weight beneath the silence. The tension that trembles beneath every stone. This city is not resting. It is waiting. Waiting for the next betrayal. Waiting for the next savior. waiting for the next storm. Beneath the golden icons and imperial crests, beneath the whispers of the monks and the forgotten names etched into the sarcophagi, there is a heartbeat. Faint. But steady. This is not a city of peace. It never was. It is a city of thresholds, where east meets west, where earth meets sky, where faith meets fire. Here, emperors have risen and vanished like smoke. Here, saints have bled. Here, the Virgin was once said to have defended the walls herself, her robe shining with divine light, her arms raised like a mother shielding her child. And here, still, the stones remember. The light shifts again. The moment passes. The city exhales. And then, a sound. Low at first. Distant. But growing. A bell. One single bell, tolling from the upper gallery of the church. Then another, and another, answering across the hills, from chapels tucked between towers, from monasteries hidden behind garden walls. The sound is not joyful. Nor is it mournful. It is something else, something deeper. A summons. A memory. A warning. They ring as they always have, even when the people forget. Even when the empire shrinks, bleeds, forgets its own name. The bells do not forget. They ring for the emperors lost. They ring for the widow's sweeping petals. They ring for the boys with wooden crosses and the priests who speak to God with cracked lips and trembling hands. They ring because something must speak for the soul of the empire, when its voice is nearly gone. And above them all, the Hagia Sophia stands, not unbroken, but unyielding. A wounded sentinel. Her dome fractured by time, her mosaics fading, her shadows long and deep. But still she stands. Beneath her vaults, the flame still burns. Not brightly. Not loudly. But steadily. And as the mists lift, curling like incense into the pale sky, the city of Constantine prepares, not to rise, not yet. But to endure. To remember. To bear witness to what was, and to what is still to come. For beyond the walls, the world shifts. Storms gather. New empires rise with hungry eyes and sharpened teeth. The time of Byzantium will not last forever. But in this moment, in this breathless pause before history strikes again, there is silence. And in that silence, faith. A quiet, battered, bleeding faith. The kind that outlives emperors. The kind that kneels in darkness. The kind that endures, when all else fades. Let the bells keep ringing. Let the empire remember itself. A thin mist rises from the riverbank, curling around the cobbled path like the fingers of a ghost unsure if it still belongs to this world. She walks barefoot. Not because she must, but because it is the only way to feel the earth, the wet stones, the cold breath of water, the living silence of the road that leads to exile. Her veil clings to her cheek in the damp air, embroidered once in gold, now frayed and stained with ink and ash. Beneath it, her mouth moves soundlessly, lips tracing remembered psalms, not out of devotion, but to hold back the trembling. The monastery lies ahead, carved into the shoulder of the hill like a wound in the land. It is small, forgotten by the court, by the city, by the voices that once called her noble, daughter, lady. Its towers lean inward, wrapped in ivy and rot, and the wooden cross above its gate creaks in the wind as if trying to escape the sky. She reaches the door and knocks once. Her knuckles sting in the cold. The sound is swallowed by the fog. After a moment, the door opens with a groan, not wide, just enough for a face to appear. A monk, his beard grey with ash, his eyes rimmed with red as if he has not slept in years. He nods without a word. Her name is known. Her presence expected. No formalities, no greetings. Only silence and the faint scent of mold and wax drifting from within. She steps through the threshold. The door shuts behind her. The sound is final, like a tomb being sealed. Inside, the world is darker, smaller. Icons lean on cracked plaster. Their golden halos are dulled by soot. Candles flicker on low shelves, their flames dancing in the stale air. Somewhere deep within the stone corridors, a thurible swings in the hands of another monk, its chain rattling like old armor. Frankincense clouds the passage, clinging to her lungs, making her eyes water. Still, she walks forward, straight-backed and silent, as she was taught. They lead her to a cell, narrow, windowless, cold. A slab of wood for a bed. A basin of water that smells of copper. A book of psalms with pages worn thin from generations of fingers hoping they would be saved by repetition. She bows. She says nothing. Her veil is removed, folded carefully and set atop the book. The monk leaves. The door clicks shut. This is her life now. She is 17. Born in Antioch. Her father once governed Dalmatia under the emperor's favor. She remembers the way he used to press his ring into wax, his voice low and steady, speaking in the tongue of law and empire. But she also remembers the shouting. The blood on the floor tiles. The letter from Constantinople, marked with the emperor's seal, instructing him to retire. The slow unraveling of his mind as he wandered through the orange groves muttering about taxes and rebels and a land that no longer obeyed his hand. Now he limps alone in a garden that has forgotten him. Now she lives among stone and silence. Days pass. She copies psalms by candlelight, her fingers stiff with cold. The ink smudges. The quill splinters. She begins again. She listens to the older nuns speak not of saints, but of emperors, as if the rulers of Byzantium were creatures of scripture themselves. Justinian, who bled his people dry to build the Hagia Sophia. Theodora, the courtesan turned queen, who stood in the hippodrome and whispered, "Purple is a fine shroud." They speak of men who marched to reclaim Rome and returned only in sacks of ash. They speak of icons torn down and kissed back into place. Of doctrine as battlefield. Of faith sharpened into a blade. Here, faith is not warm or kind. It is rigorous. It demands silence, obedience, the death of the self. She learns to fast until her hands shake. Learns to pray without words. Learns to see herself as something to be refined, like metal in fire. But something else grows, too. In the quiet. In the ink. She finds a joy she did not expect in the pages, not in their words, but in the act of preserving them. She learns to shape letters like prayers. Learns that beauty can be a form of defiance. That carefulness is its own kind of power. Each page she completes feels like a rebellion against disappearance. One night, while cleaning the scriptorium, she discovers a loose brick behind an old shelf. Behind it, folded carefully and wrapped in linen, is a single manuscript, untouched, unspoken of. She opens it slowly, the parchment crumbling at the edges. The handwriting is rushed, uneven, desperate. It is not scripture. It is a sermon. A letter. A confession. Written by a nun who lived through the plague years, who watched her sisters die one by one and wrote, not for the church, not for God, but for herself. It speaks of grief as a second skin. Of Byzantium not as a city or an empire, but as a wound, sacred, cursed, unhealed. She writes, "We are the salt that keeps it from rotting. That is our task. That is our punishment." The girl reads it again. And again. The candle burns low. Her breath curls in the cold. Outside, a dog howls, distant and forgotten. She copies the sermon by hand. Not because she is told to, but because she cannot let it vanish. When it is done, she tucks it beneath her mattress like a secret relic. The days blur. Seasons pass. Snow seeps through the cracks in the stone. The nuns boil bark for tea. Once, they share a single orange between them. They eat it in silence, weeping. In time, the girl learns to speak less and hear more. She listens to the creak of wood, the breath of wind through broken shutters, the rasp of old lungs as the elder sister dies in her sleep. They bury her with no procession. Only a psalm. Only candlelight. Later, the girl writes a new hymn. Soft, hesitant, unfinished. She hides it behind the altar. Sometimes, the monks visit from the neighboring monastery, bringing honeycomb or candles or news of Constantinople. One of them, young and limping, tells her of the riots in the capital. Of mobs overturning altars. Of the emperor's growing silence. He carries a scroll from the court, but will not say what it contains. She watches him closely. Wonders what burden he carries. Wonders if all messengers walk like wounded men. That night, she dreams of the hippodrome, but not as it is now. In her dream, it is full again. Voices rise like thunder. Blue and green banners snap in the wind. She walks the edge of the arena, veiled and unnoticed. Beneath her, the sand is soaked in old blood. Above her, the emperor watches from his box, face hidden, crown cracked. She wakes with the taste of dust in her mouth. And for the first time in months, she speaks aloud, "I am still here." Her voice surprises her. It sounds older. She begins to write more. Not just scripture. But thoughts. Prayers. Fragments. She does not sign them. She tucks them into the corners of books, behind stones, beneath floorboards. Small truths hidden in a world built on silence. And though no one speaks of it, she senses the weight shifting. The empire is shrinking. The borders recede like a tide that will never return. The court grows quieter. The letters from Antioch stop coming. But the ink remains. And one morning, while sweeping the steps of the chapel, she hears the bells ring out, low, heavy, deliberate. Not for death. Not for mass. But for memory. And as their echoes roll through the valley, as the sky lightens with another gray dawn, she lifts her eyes. She is no longer 17. She is no longer a daughter. She is something else now. A keeper. A witness. A thread in the wound. She turns back toward the scriptorium, fingers stained with ink, heart steady with silence. And somewhere, beyond the hills, beyond the crumbling towers of empire, something else stirs. A sword being drawn. A letter being sealed. A throne beginning to tremble. But she will remain. With her quill. With her parchment. With the sacred wound stitched in silence. Waiting for the sound of the next bell, the wind moves like a blade across the Anatolian plateau, not loud, but sharp, slicing through wool cloaks and leather armor as if seeking out the old wounds buried in the flesh beneath. Snow gathers in thick, stubborn drifts along the broken ridgelines, blurring the shape of the land, hiding stones, graves, and forgotten banners beneath its silence. A column moves through it, men and beasts wrapped in frost, trudging eastward like phantoms through a white sea. They do not sing. Their breath steams and vanishes. Their eyes are half shut, not from sleep, but from remembering. They are not marching to battle. Not yet. This is the walk of men who have lost too much to rush. The weight of what they carry, blades dulled by old wars, icons wrapped in linen, names that no longer matter, slows them more than the snow. At the head of the column rides a commander cloaked in red and ash. His beard is matted with windburn and blood. His right hand shakes when he tries to hold it still, a tremor left from a wound taken years ago. He hides it beneath a leather glove, but the men have seen it. And they do not speak of it. He remembers the place where it happened. Manzikert. A plain that should have been victory. Sunlight pouring like fire over the fields. Arrows blotting out the sky. Then the silence that fell when the emperor surrendered. He remembers how the chain of command collapsed like rotted wood. How banners were torn down not by Turks, but by their own. How betrayal moved faster than steel. His sword arm was struck not in the heat of battle, but in the retreat, by one of his own, clawing for a horse. There was no glory. Just dust and shame. Now, every step he takes echoes with that memory. Behind him, the men trudge on. Some are veterans. Some are boys. One carries a tiny relic wrapped in red thread, a splinter of the true cross, they say. Another keeps a tattered icon tied to his chest with twine. The paint is nearly gone, but the Virgin's eyes still watch. The snow thickens. Visibility falls. The only sounds now are the crunch of hooves, the distant moan of ice underfoot, and the clinking of bronze fastenings against chainmail. By dusk, they find shelter in the ruins of a church, its dome half collapsed, its stone ribs jutting into the sky like broken fingers reaching toward a god who has turned away. The wind howls through the empty apse. Snow gathers in the nave. The altar is gone. Only scorched mosaics remain, half covered in soot and frost. They build fires where the faithful once knelt. The smoke curls up toward what used to be heaven. The commander does not join them. He finds a shadowed corner near the collapsed bell tower and kneels with difficulty, his joints stiff and slow. He removes his glove and stares at his hand, still trembling, even now. He opens a leather satchel tied at his waist and draws out a rusted icon. It is small, barely larger than his palm. The Virgin and Child. Worn smooth from years of touch, the face of Christ nearly vanished. He places it gently on a flat stone and leans forward until his forehead touches the ground. No prayer comes. Just breath. Just the ache in his spine and the weight behind his ribs. Nearby, a boy asks, "What was the empire like, before?" No one answers. One man shrugs. Another spits into the snow. A third stares into the fire, lips moving as if repeating a litany from a life he no longer believes in. The boy asks again. The commander does not lift his head. But he speaks, quietly, as if to the smoke. It was full. He does not explain. He does not need to. The silence that follows is heavier than snow. They eat what they have, salted meat, hard bread soaked in vinegar, a jug of wine that tastes of tin and dust. It warms their throats but not their hearts. Outside, wolves cry. Inside, a soldier hums a hymn he half remembers, off-key, lost in the wind. One by one, they sleep. The commander dreams. He is standing before a gate, tall, iron, shut tight. He knows this gate. He ran to it once. Called for it to be opened. Behind it, Constantinople shone like a chalice. But the gate remained closed. No one answered. In the dream, he bangs his fist against it until his hand bleeds. Still, no one answers. He wakes before dawn. The fire has gone out. The air is bitter with frost. He wraps the icon again, tying it with shaking fingers. He does not kiss it. He cannot. By sunrise, they are marching again. The snow is deeper. The sky, darker. But they move. Not toward glory. Not toward victory. Those are illusions, masks the empire wore when it still believed in itself. Now, they walk for something else. Something nameless. The men do not ask where they are going. The commander does not say. Perhaps he does not know. Perhaps they are only walking to prove they still can. Hours pass. A raven circles overhead, its cry sharp against the muffled world. It lands on a nearby branch and watches them pass, unmoved. They cross a frozen stream, its surface cracked and groaning. A man falls through, screaming once before they pull him free. His hands are blue. He will not live. No one speaks of it. They reach a ridge by twilight. From here, they can see the edge of the empire, or what remains of it. Far below, the plains stretch empty and wide. Smoke rises in the distance. Villages burnt, perhaps. Or a signal. Or nothing at all. The commander stands at the edge, the wind tugging at his cloak. He does not speak. He only closes his eyes. He hears a voice. Not from the men. Not from memory. A woman's voice. Soft. Ancient. You were not meant to last. You were meant to endure. He opens his eyes. The snow falls thicker now, blanketing the ruins, the pain, the past. Tomorrow, they will walk again. And the day after. Until they can no longer. But tonight, beneath a fractured sky, with broken hands and trembling hearts, they wait. Not for salvation. But for the silence that comes before history breaks again. Somewhere far to the west, the bells of Constantinople ring out for vespers, slow and heavy, as if unsure whether the city they call still exists. The sound does not reach them. But still, the commander turns his head, as if he hears it in his blood. He touches the satchel at his side. And steps forward. Because even broken things must walk, the torch dies in the wind. Its flame, once steady, is taken in a sudden hiss, swallowed by the cold breath of night. Smoke curls upward, vanishing into a sky stained black with clouds and memory. Around it, the camp is still. Men sleep beside their spears, wrapped in wool and silence, their dreams too heavy to lift their eyes. Only the coals glow now, like dying stars beneath their cloaks. But one man is awake. He kneels beside the ashes, hands outstretched, not for warmth, but for what was lost. His name is Nicetas. Once a scholar. Once a priest. Once something softer. But war reshapes the flesh, not with swords, but with silence. And now, he wears a soldier's cloak, stained at the edges with mud and prayer. In his hands, he holds a scroll. Not scripture. Not orders. A record. He writes when others sleep. He listens when others forget. His ink is made from soot and wine, and he writes on scraps of stolen parchment, folded and hidden beneath his armor. He does not know why he records these things. Only that he must. As if history itself has grown tired of the lies carved into marble and longs for the truth buried beneath blood and salt. Tonight, he writes of fire. Of how the empire burns not from without, but within. He writes of a village, nameless, faceless, somewhere between Konya and the Euphrates. A place where the people once rang bells for Easter, where wheat once grew tall in the wind. Now, it is ash. Its church torn down for timber. Its well filled with bones. He was there. He saw what they did. Not the Turks. Not the infidels. But their own, soldiers bearing the double-headed eagle, drunk on hunger and the scent of rotted grain. They took what they could. And then they left nothing. Nicetas begged the commander to intervene. To stop them. To show mercy. The commander looked at him and said, "Mercy is a luxury of the fed." Nicetas has not spoken since. He writes. Because someone must remember. Somewhere, an owl cries. Somewhere, the bells of Constantinople toll vespers, too far to hear, but close enough to haunt the bones. The wind rises. It smells of snow and rust. He ties the scroll shut, seals it with wax, and hides it beneath his breastplate. Then, he looks east. A fire glows faintly on the horizon, too steady to be natural. A camp. A fortress. Or something worse. The empire has stretched thin. Its skin torn by revolts, its veins choked by gold that no longer flows. In the east, the Seljuk horsemen gather like storm clouds. In the west, old allies now circle like vultures. And in the heart, in the cities, in the palaces, the emperors blind their brothers and call it policy. Nicetas rises. The commander's voice carries softly in the distance. Orders murmured over the sleeping, like curses spoken in a chapel. Tomorrow, they march. Not toward victory, but toward a rumor. A whisper of a stronghold still loyal, still holding fast beyond the broken roads and razed fields. The emperor has promised gold to whoever reaches it. But Nicetas does not believe in gold. He believes in memory. And in what must be carried. At dawn, the frost has hardened into glass. The breath of the men forms clouds, and the horses snort nervously as if they sense what lies ahead. Nicetas walks in silence. Beside him, a boy hums a hymn. He cannot be more than 16. His fingers are raw from cold, but he still grips the spear as if it were a cross. The road narrows. The trees draw in, twisted, leafless, blackened by an old fire. Ravens watch from crooked branches. The only sound is the crunch of boots, the soft groan of tired wood, and the whisper of wind through hollow bark. Then, movement. Shadows between the trunks. The column halts. The commander raises a hand. No one speaks. A shape emerges. A woman, barefoot, cloaked in rags, her hair tangled with thorns. She holds a bundle to her chest. A child, perhaps. Or something smaller. Nicetas steps forward before the others can raise their bows. The woman does not run. She only stares, eyes wide, unblinking, like someone who has seen too much to fear anything more. He reaches her. She opens her arms. It is not a child. It is a skull. Small. Wrapped in linen. She places it in his hands and whispers, "Tell them we were here." Then she vanishes into the trees. Nicetas stands frozen, the skull cradled like a relic. The commander says nothing. Only gestures to move on. The column marches forward. The skull is buried beneath a fallen icon, beside the road. Nicetas marks the place in his scroll. And they walk on. By nightfall, they reach the stronghold, or what remains of it. Stone walls, black with soot. A gate hanging loose. Arrows embedded in the doors like teeth in a jaw. Inside, there is silence. No smoke. No movement. They enter. The courtyard is littered with armor, not stripped, not looted. Just, left. As if the men inside vanished without undressing. Sword still sheathed. Bread still unbroken. Nicetas steps into the chapel. The altar is intact. A candle still burns. And beside it, scrawled on the wall in charcoal, "He is not here." He kneels. Not to pray. To weep. Outside, the commander orders the men to sleep in shifts. There is no safety, only exhaustion. Nicetas writes again. He does not know who will read this. Perhaps no one. Perhaps a monk 100 years from now, in a different world. But he writes. Because in the ruins of this world, memory is the last rebellion. He ends the scroll with one sentence: we no longer fight for the empire. We fight to prove we existed. And as he seals it, as he places it in the hollow of the altar wall, as he lights another candle, the wind rises once more. The torch by the gate flares, and then dies again. Somewhere, a boy begins to sing. Not a hymn. A lullaby. One his mother used to hum, back when wheat still grew, and bells still rang. The camera rises. Over the ruined fortress. Over the shattered chapel. Over the men curled like stones around their memories. And in the distance, across the white horizon, a new fire burns. Not theirs. And not friendly. Nicetas watches it from the tower. His breath fogs the air. His hands do not tremble. He closes his eyes and whispers, "Let them come." And the snow falls, the ground moved before the noise reached them. Not like thunder, no. Thunder rolls. This came as a pulse, low, hungry, unrelenting, like the world itself had begun to breathe. Soil shifted in soft jerks. Pebbles danced. Horses grew restless. Men looked at each other with wide eyes, waiting for a command that never came. Then came the sound. Drums. Not for celebration. Not for parade. War drums. Slow. Ancient. Unforgiving. From the hills to the east, the Seljuk banners appeared like black wings unfolding from the mist. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Then too many to count. Their rhythm did not rush. It marched with certainty, like a predator circling a wounded beast. They knew the Byzantines were tired. Hungry. Outnumbered. Cut off. The commander said nothing. He simply turned to his men, not with a rousing speech, not with fire in his voice, but with a look that said, "If we are to die, let us die with steel in hand and our names in the wind." No one wept. There were no tears left in this army. Only salt from old wounds and dried lips. Niketas knelt in the shadow of a ruined archway, clutching his satchel of scrolls. He did not reach for his sword. Not yet. Instead, he dipped his fingers into ash and made the sign of the cross on his brow. His prayer was not for survival. It was for remembrance. And still, the drums. The Seljuks encircled them by nightfall. Torches lined the ridges like stars drawn too close to earth. Their horses snorted in the darkness. Flutes wailed. A haunting, high-pitched sound that turned the blood cold. It was music, yes, but not the kind sung by men who valued mercy. There would be no negotiations. This was not a siege. It was an execution. Inside the crumbling fort, the Byzantines prepared as best they could. Oil was poured. Arrows fletched. Stones stacked near the battlements. But no one spoke of hope. Only of delay. Hold them long enough to burn the maps. To scatter the letters. To destroy what could not fall into enemy hands. Niketas found the boy again, the one who had hummed hymns on the march. He was sharpening a blade, lips pressed in silent prayer. "You've killed before?" Niketas asked, voice low, almost a whisper. The boy shook his head. "No," he said. "But I watched my brother die. That was enough." The first arrow came before dawn. No trumpet. No formal call to battle. Just the soft hiss of death cutting the sky. It struck a guard through the throat, mid-sentence, mid-laugh, and he fell without a sound. Blood pooled quietly around his feet. A second later, the air filled with the hum of countless more. The attack had begun. Flames roared against the walls. Siege towers rolled forward, pulled by oxen and men alike. The Byzantines answered with what little they had, rocks, boiling oil, short bursts of courage lit like sparks. Niketas did not fight at first. He wrote. Hunched in a cellar, by candlelight, beneath the floorboards where once a priest gave sermons, he wrote. "They have come like the tide. But we are not sand. We are bones." Outside, screams echoed. The walls groaned. Steel clashed with steel in bursts of agony and prayer. He wrote until the candle died. And then, he rose. On the battlements, the boy had taken a wound, a gash to the shoulder. Still he stood, blade trembling, eyes full of something between terror and ecstasy. He had survived his first kill. Niketas dragged him to shelter, bandaged him with strips of his own cloak. "Why do they hate us?" the boy asked. Niketas could not answer. Because hate, like hunger, needs no reason. By midday, the eastern gate had fallen. The Seljuks surged through like wolves unleashed, not in fury, but with grim efficiency. They did not scream. They did not chant. They killed with the silence of executioners. Every room became a trap. Every hallway, a grave. Niketas retreated with a dozen others to the chapel. The door was barricaded with pews. The iconostasis had been smashed earlier by a catapult strike. Only a fragment of the Virgin's face remained on the wall, her eyes cracked, her lips missing, but her gaze still watching. A soldier paced near the altar. "If they break in, we kill ourselves," he said. Nicetas looked at the others. No one disagreed. He sat and opened his final scroll. "If God sees us now, let him judge with tears, not wrath. We did not ask for glory. We asked for time." Then, silence. No screams. No clash of arms. Just the sound of wind. The soldier crept to the door. Then turned. "They're gone," he said. "Gone." No one moved for a moment. Then slowly, like men waking from death, they pushed the pews aside and stepped into the courtyard. It was empty. Bodies, yes. Smoke, yes. But no Seljuks. They had left. Not in defeat. Not in haste. But as if their purpose had been served, and there was nothing left worth taking. The commander stood by the broken gate. Blood down his arm. Eyes lost in a 1,000-yard stare. He turned to Nicetas. "We are ghosts," he said. "And ghosts do not need walls." That night, the survivors buried what they could. They burned the rest. Nicetas stood on the tower, scroll clutched to his chest, eyes scanning the horizon. The torch beside him burned steady. No wind. No sound but the distant caw of crows. He whispered to the boy, now asleep at his side, "We will walk west. Toward the sea. Toward nothing, if need be. But we will walk. Because even ashes remember the fire." And somewhere beyond the smoke, another chapter waited. One not written in blood. But in silence that a bell rang through the mist, though there was no church left to ring it. Only a fragment of the bell tower stood, jagged stone against the pale morning light, and yet the sound echoed as if struck by some unseen hand. A low, hollow toll. One that made the crows scatter. One that did not belong to the living. The survivors had come to the valley not for shelter, but for memory. For once, this had been a Byzantine outpost, a monastery hidden among the cliffs, watching over the distant river like a blind sentinel. Now, its roof was gone. Its icons shattered. Only the cold stones remained, slick with dew and stained with smoke. Nicetas knelt in the rubble. He ran his fingers across a fragment of painted plaster, a saint's face, chipped at the edges, eyes still staring toward heaven. "Are we still being watched?" he muttered. "Or has even God turned his gaze away?" Behind him, the boy coughed. His bandage was dark with blood, but he did not complain. The fever had passed. For now. Around them, the remnants of the column gathered, 20 men, 5 women, and a girl too young to speak. They sat among the ruins like shadows cast by a fire that no longer burned. No one asked where they would go next. They had passed the point of maps. Beyond strategy. Beyond survival. They were living on memory now. On instinct. On borrowed time. That evening, a wind rose from the west. Not a comforting breeze, but a sharp, dry wind that stripped leaves from the trees and howled through broken windows like a lament. It brought no rain. No mercy. Only the scent of dust, and something else. Smoke. At first, Nicetas thought it was from their own fire. But then he saw it, curling over the ridge, black and oily. Not the smoke of wood. The smoke of wet cloth, burning wheat, rotted flesh. He stood. A rider appeared moments later, half collapsed on his horse, his surcoat unrecognizable beneath mud and blood. He had no helmet. No sword. Only his eyes spoke. "They've come south," he rasped. "They burned Adrianople. Took the fields. Salted the wells. They are not fighting us." He looked at Nicetas, breath shallow. "They are erasing us." He died before he could dismount. The silence that followed was not shocked, it was resigned. No one wailed. No one cursed. They simply turned toward the firelight blooming on the horizon. Toward the slow death of an empire. Nicetas gathered the children. He told them a story. Not of saints or emperors, but of a dog. A black hound that guarded a monastery long ago. When the soldiers came, the monks fled, but the dog stayed. It stood at the gate until the blade found its spine. And when they burned the church, the dog's bones turned to ash beside the altar. The children listened, eyes wide. One of them asked, "Why didn't the dog run?" Nicetas smiled, a tired, bitter smile. Because the dog believed the fire would stop for faith. He said nothing more. That night, they buried the rider beneath the chapel floor. No cross. No name. Just a stone to mark that someone had once stood, when others fell. In the days that followed, the wind did not change. They marched again, this time westward, toward the sea, toward rumors of a port still held by loyal hands. Their boots tore in the brambles. Their rations turned to mold. But still they walked. Because sometimes, walking is all that keeps a soul from breaking. On the 5th day, they passed a burned village. The doors were torn from their hinges. The wells poisoned. Livestock slaughtered and left to rot in the sun. But no bodies. Not a single corpse. Only the silence of absence. The kind that speaks louder than screams. A mother in the group whispered, "They took them." Nicetas nodded. But he did not say what they had taken them for. Instead, he entered the church, or what remained of it, and pulled from the ashes a single iron nail. He wrapped it in cloth and placed it in his pouch, beside the scrolls. One nail, to remember the cross. One nail, to remember that pain is not always in vain. The boy, now stronger, walked beside him. He had begun to speak again, not much, but enough. He asked questions. Sometimes about God. Sometimes about the empire. Once, he asked, "Why do they hate us so deeply?" Nicetas paused. He looked at the horizon, then at the boy. "They don't hate us. Not really. They hate what we were." "And what were we?" Nicetas didn't answer. Because to answer would mean lying, or remembering things that no longer mattered. That night, they made camp beneath the ruins of a bridge. The river had dried to a trickle, like veins beneath the skin of a dying man. But the stone still stood, arched in defiance against a world unraveling. Nicetas stared into the fire. He whispered, "Rome is not walls. Rome is not gold." He looked at the boy. "Rome is what we refuse to forget." The boy nodded. Then asked the question no one dared speak, "Are we the last?" Nicetas did not respond. He didn't need to. Because the truth hung between them like a blade not yet drawn. The next morning, they found a banner. Tangled in the reeds, half submerged in muck, the imperial eagle still barely visible beneath the grime. Nicetas pulled it free. He did not wash it. He let the mud cling to it, a reminder of what it had cost. They marched under it. Not as an army. As a memory refusing to die. When they reached the coast, the sea greeted them not with waves, but with fog. Thick. Wet. Endless. Ships could be heard but not seen. Bells rang in the mist. Voices echoed without source. And then, from the haze, a ship appeared. Not Byzantine. Venetian. White sails. Red cross. Silent as a ghost. It docked without greeting. A man stepped off. Tall, cloaked, face hidden. "You are survivors?" he asked. Nicetas stepped forward. He did not answer the question. "What will you give for us?" he asked instead. The man did not flinch. "Nothing," he said. But we will take you west. To where? The man smiled, the kind of smile that held no warmth. To where things still burn in gold. Nicetas turned to the group. They waited for his answer. He looked once more at the banner in his hand, torn, soaked, stained with blood. Then he let it fall. The ship sailed by night. No one spoke. Only the sea whispered. As if it, too, mourned something lost beneath its waves. Nicetas stood at the prow, scroll in hand, ink smudged from the damp air. He wrote his final words before sleep took him: "We are the ashes carried by wind, the names the earth forgets. But if ever they build walls again, let them find our bones beneath the stones, whispering still. We were Byzantium. And we remembered." From the shore, nothing could be seen. Only mist. And the fading echo of a bell, deep in the sea fog. A lantern swung in the dark. Its flame trembled in the salted wind, casting long, jittering shadows against the damp walls of the hold. Every creak of the ship's bones echoed like distant thunder. Wood groaned. Ropes strained. And beneath it all, the breathless silence of those who had nowhere else to go. Nicetas did not sleep. He hadn't closed his eyes since the ship left the Thracian coast. The boy slept fitfully at his side, curled in a wool cloak that still smelled of ash. Somewhere above, the sails flapped like wings in morning. The sea was black. The sky, blind. And yet they moved forward, toward what, none could say. It was not exile. Exile implies a homeland still exists. This was something colder. A drifting after death. The survivors had crossed the threshold of empire. Not into enemy land, but into the realm of forgotten things. Ruined cities. Lost tongues. Ghosts that walked in daylight, wearing the robes of merchants and priests. They arrived in Venetian Thessalonica at dawn. But it was not the city Nicetas had known. Gone were the voices of Greek traders echoing in the arcades. Gone were the hymns that once rose from the Hagios Demetrios like incense to the heavens. The cross still hung, but thinner now, more political than holy. Frankish knights laughed in Latin. Genoese clerks scrawled prices on papyrus with fingers soft from too much ink. It was a city still breathing, but not alive. Nicetas stepped off the gangplank with a stiffness born not of age, but of memory. His boots hit stone. Familiar stone. Yet the warmth was gone. Even the pigeons seemed wary. A monk passed him in the square, shaved head, foreign vestment, lips moving in a prayer not native to the East. The boy asked, "Is this still Byzantium?" Nicetas did not answer. He only looked up, at the fortress rising above the port, now flying a banner not of the double-headed eagle, but of the Lion of St. Mark. In that moment, he understood, the empire had not been taken in one night. It had not died at Manzikert, or Myriokephalon, or even at the walls of Constantinople. It had bled to death. Quietly. From within. That night, they took refuge in the ruins of an old bathhouse. The marble was cracked. The mosaics had faded, but still whispered stories in blue and gold, kings bathing beside saints, emperors crowned by angels, water flowing like memory through every tile. Nicetas touched the wall. Dust came away on his fingertips like forgotten names. "Tomorrow," he said, "we go north." Someone laughed, a bitter, brittle sound. "North? There's nothing left there but bandits and bones." Nicetas turned. "There's a monastery. In the hills near Skopje. They keep the old books. If we bring the scrolls there, they may preserve them." A woman spat near his feet. "Preserve what? Ghosts? My son died for those ghosts. My husband burned for them." She held his gaze with the defiance of grief. "I want no more prayers. I want bread." Nicetas said nothing. He simply reached into his pouch, pulled the iron nail he'd carried since the church in Thrace, and placed it gently on the stone beside her. Then take this, he said. And remember, even the bread we break was once held by faith. She did not pick it up. But she did not speak again. They left at sunrise. Not all followed. Some remained, seeking work, warmth, a place to vanish. But those who still believed, those who still carried embers beneath the ash, walked. Nicetas. The boy. The silent ones. 3 days into the hills, they came upon a burned column. Knights. Or what remained of them. Blackened armor twisted by fire. Horses lying with legs frozen in mid-gallop. A banner nailed to a tree, its silk torn, its symbol unrecognizable. The boy covered his mouth. Nicetas knelt beside the nearest corpse. Its hands were gone. Cut at the wrists. This wasn't war, he said. This was warning. At dusk, it rained. Not a cleansing rain, but a cold, endless drizzle that turned the path to mud and the soul to stone. They found shelter beneath a collapsed aqueduct, its arches like ribs of a giant long dead. There, they shared silence and boiled roots. The boy broke the stillness. Why do we keep walking? Nicetas stared into the flames. Because if we stop, the silence wins. The boy nodded, and said no more. By the 7th day, the mountains opened. The monastery was there, high above the trees, carved into the rock like a secret kept too long. Lanterns flickered behind narrow windows. The scent of wood smoke curled downward. Bells rang softly, not in triumph, but in sorrow. A monk met them at the gate. His beard was white. His eyes, darker than ink. You have brought the scrolls, he asked. Nicetas held out the pouch. They are not complete, he said. But they are true. The monk nodded. That is enough. Inside, the walls were lined with parchment. Shelves groaned with the weight of centuries. On a central table lay a map, aged, cracking, drawn in a hand older than memory. The monk pointed to it. This, he said, is the empire as it was. He then picked up a coal stick, and traced a new line. This, he whispered, is what remains. A breath passed. Then another. Nicetas spoke. Then we write again. And so they began. Not with proclamations. Not with treaties. But with stories. Of cities lost. Of saints remembered. Of fields sown with salt and tears. They wrote in ink made of ash and wine, on parchment made from goat skin and grief. Each word was a defiance. Each sentence, a resurrection. The boy learned to write his name. Then the name of the emperor. Then the creed of those who would not forget. The winter came. Snow fell in silence, covering the world like a shroud. Wolves howled in the forest. Trees cracked beneath the weight of frost. But within the monastery, the fire never died. One night, the monk approached Nicetas. He placed before him a small bundle, wrapped in linen, sealed with wax. What is this? Nicetas asked. The monk's voice was soft. The last will of the city. Nicetas understood. When the time came, this would be carried east. Or west. Or buried beneath stone. But it would live. So long as memory lived. At spring's first thaw, the bells rang again. Not for death. Not for mourning. But for a birth. A child had been born in the lower chamber, to one of the women who had walked from Thessalonica with nothing but her grief. Now, she held a daughter in her arms. The first Byzantine born after the fall. Nicetas stood by the cradle. He traced a cross over the girl's brow. She will never see the walls of Constantinople, he whispered. But perhaps, she will build new ones. He turned to the boy, now older, taller, no longer coughing. Write her name, Nicetas said. The boy dipped his quill. Pressed it to parchment. And with a trembling hand, wrote, Hope. Outside, the snow melted. The sun rose over the mountains. And though the eagle no longer flew from any tower, its shadow still passed over the earth, quiet, watchful, unbroken. A silence remained. But it was no longer empty. It waited. For memory. For fire. For the next name written in blood or ink. And the wind, though cold, now carried something else, something almost forgotten, the sound of a beginning.